Hey, and welcome to the Invert Podcast. So my name's Nat from Somerset Spiders, and today we're going to we got an exciting guest for you who Leah will introduce. But I'll pass you over to Leah now. So Leah, hi, how you doing?
Hello, I'm Leah. I'm from Tarantulia. And yes, today we have a wonderful guest. His name is Tom, and he is from Ants on a Rock.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Tom.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's brilliant to have you on, Thomas. Some of our viewers would have known that Thomas was going to be on an earlier podcast, but some things got in the way of that. But we're really lucky that we can have Thomas here today to talk about all things to do with ants and maybe some other inverts. I have got to go and watch your other video though, Thomas, because I saw that you picked up something else, some reptiles or something like that.
We got a few cool pickups at the IHS the other day. Yeah,
that's it, the IHS show. Yeah, no, fantastic. So, hi, Shady. We got Shady watching. So, everyone as well, if you have any questions for Thomas about ants or the care of ants, feel free to put it into the chat, and we will definitely get round to that. So, Thomas, how have you been doing?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Busy as always, but I'm enjoying the nice sunshine. I will say though, the only thing wrong with the sunshine is my office. As you might notice, faces a window. 4 or 5 o'clock every day, I get blinded. But we'll push on.
Yeah. We'll push through that. You might have to put some sunglasses on, or
I've got some on standby. Yeah,
yeah. If you need them. So it's the normal format, as always on the podcast. So we're going to have some questions. I don't know, Leah, if you wanted to maybe start off. If you had anything, or
absolutely. I've got
feel free to use something off your pad.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely. I had a really a good starter question for me, which is what makes ants such a cool pet?
Ooh,
what makes them
question.
so? Yeah.
Okay, for me personally, it's been a lifelong love. I can honestly say, since I was a young child, all I wanted to do was them dig in their tunnels and moving dirt and all of those sorts of things. And it's the intelligence, isn't it? It's the way they work together and they solve problems. And like, I've got a lot of inverts, but the ants kind of top it all when it comes to interestingness, if you know what I mean. There's always something to watch, always something going on. And like the way they overcome their challenges and things, you can see them problem solving, and it's just so enticing. You can spend hours and hours just stuck there watching ants.
That's amazing. Okay, so a follow-up for this question. Are they more interactive as a pet, or are they more of a kind of a no touch, just kind of leave them do their thing?
Yeah, it's a hard one, right? For most keepers, we wouldn't touch our ants. I will say some keepers do like to handle their ants. Some keepers will even handle their queens. I personally, I won't handle my queen ants because they can be quite sensitive, and any kind of stress will stop them laying altogether. But occasionally I do handle workers, sometimes not on purpose. Sometimes they just climb all over me and they tend to bite. I do have one friend who can literally pick up any ant and never get bitten, and I can't work it out. Yeah, he's the luckiest person I've ever met because I can pick up the same ant and it will literally attach itself to my finger. So you do tend to find that you don't really mess about with, you don't interact with the ants in that way, but there is other ways you can interact with them. there's Paul in the chat right now. That's actually the lucky man we're talking about. That's like ant proof. The other thing you can do is you can put interesting foods in for them and challenges for them to overcome, things to move and things like that. So you can interact with them, but not on that kind of personal level. You can't stroke an ant, really.
No. I think it'd be quite hard to stroke an ant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, you can.
They're so small. I would be afraid to. I think me personally. Oh, I apologize for the sirens if you guys can hear that.
So,
But yeah, the ambulance. Um, Me personally, I think I agree with you. Like I would probably be very afraid to interact or to handle them, because they are so
yeah.
small. So it's hard to, how do you go about not crushing them?
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean,
Mhm.
there is the leaf cutters behind me.
Mm.
They're actually got quite a hard exoskeleton, so we can pick these up quite easily. Just bring it to the
Oh.
camera.
Oh
Can't
wow.
really see it.
Oh, there,
But
yeah,
he
you can
will,
see it on
he will,
Yeah,
yeah, he'll fight me in a minute. But
they're
these ones are,
cool.
yeah, they've got a really hard exoskeleton, so you can literally almost pick them up and ball them up, and they'll be completely fine. But
Huh.
most ants you can't do this with at all.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'll put him back.
Mhm. So
So,
with
oh, sorry, carry on, Leah.
yeah, sorry. So with the leaf cutter ants, do they? So I know they don't they come from the Amazon rainforest?
Yes, yeah, they do. Yeah.
Do they require a specific leaf?
They're actually not that picky when it comes to leaves. They're
Hmm.
like, I mainly feed them on privet and dandelion and things like that. So really accessible, easy to get hold of things in my garden at least. The only
Mhm.
thing that is really, well, I say the only thing, the hardest thing about them is actually their fungus chamber. It needs to be at about 25 degrees and about 99% humidity all the time. If it goes up by about 2 or 3 degrees or goes down by 2 or 3 degrees, you're at likeliness of losing all the fungus, and that's the end of your colony, really.
Wow.
That's the hardest part. Yeah. So obviously, in our summers, it can get really, really hot, and you've got to keep it cool. And in our winters, you've got to keep it heated, and that's the hardest part. So leaf cutters are really like they're like the pinnacle of ant keeping. Like most people wouldn't get leaf cutters because they are quite sensitive, and those slight fluctuations can risk the whole, and they're very expensive.
So,
Yeah,
sorry.
they definitely sound like an expert level ant species for sure. Because yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Go ahead now. I apologize.
So I, as you were saying about their fungus chamber, so their primary food source is the fungus they grow. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. So they cut the leaves, but they don't actually eat the leaves. They take it back to the fungus chamber, where a smaller cast of ant will break it down, place it onto the fungus that's already there, and help it grow into more fungus. Interestingly, they do still require like the nectar that they
Hmm.
would get from within the leaf. So when they're cutting the leaf, they're
Go ahead.
actually ingesting a slight bit of nectar. So in captivity, we do give them a little bit of sugar top up every now and then, and that's actually something that's not widely known on leaf cutters.
Okay, yeah, because I was saying before we came onto the podcast that I'd just been watching your video, and you were saying about how you give them that little sugar top up as a treat, unlike
Yeah.
other species of ants that you might
Hmm.
sort of keep. So that sort of takes me on to my next question about ant keeping, though. So when we're thinking about ant keeping, and for people that maybe haven't kept ants ever before or are looking to get into the hobby, what would you say would be a good intermediate species for someone to keep that might be a little bit more robust, or as we call it within the tarantula hobby, they're open to keeper mistakes, so they're like a little bit more hardy, and so you can look after it. So we would be thinking something like a Phonopalma calcodes, for instance, for someone as a tarantula. That are pretty forgiving of keeping mistakes, and they, so do you have anything in the ant world that would be similar?
Yeah. So in the UK, we kind of the standard go-to if you're starting ant, we will always ant keeping. We will always suggest go Lasius niger. That's the little black ants that you see running in your garden. They're literally everywhere, common as common gets, and they're really easy to keep.
Yeah.
They're super hardy. Like you can I've known people that have dropped the test tube, picked it back up, and they've carried on completely fine. You know, they're really forgiving of mistakes, like you say, and they're not really sensitive to temperature fluctuations, etc., etc. So something like Lasius niger is a great starter species. But I do tend to find a lot of people don't want to go with Lasius niger because they haven't got that sort of aggressiveness. They haven't got the size to them, you know. So there's other species like Mesobarbarus. Now, Mesobarbarus can be quite sensitive in the founding stage. I admit they are quite hard in the founding stage. You have to be, they're quite sensitive to light, vibrations, noise, pretty much everything. But once they get out of that founding stage, they do become a bit more hardy. And in the ant keeping world, you can basically choose whether you want to start with just a queen or whether you want to skip that stage and get some workers as well. So that's quite a good level to start with. So when I'm doing, we do a like subscription learning service. We send out 3 ants over the course of the year, and we start with the Lasius niger, then we move on to Lasius flavus, and then we move on to Mesobarbarus. And that just kind of gives like the whole range of moving through the stages for us.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. And then the next ones I always suggest after that is a species of Camponotus. It doesn't really matter what species. That comes down to like personal preference of if you want a fast growing or slower, larger, so on and so forth. But Camponotus have always been like, there's so many different Camponotus, it's ridiculous. I actually forget how many there is. There's thousands of different species in this genus. They're all quite large, so they're impressive to look at. They get majors and different cast of workers. So generally, they're a really great ant for keeping. They are still quite forgiving, but they're not as easy as the Nigers or something like that. So I always say Camponotus is sort of your go-to, but they can be, they can test your patience quite a lot, because the larger the ant is, the longer it takes for them to hatch from an egg to a worker. So if you're talking like a large Camponotus ant, you could be, 2 to 3 months, and it's a lot of waiting, a lot of patience.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of one of the things that I've definitely learned since being in the invert hobby itself is I've definitely learned a lot of patience, and that's it. And I think also if you've spent that time looking after something for that long, and then you see a worker ant come out or develop, or all different things like that, it really makes it worth it, doesn't it? In the end,
it does. It really does. I mean, as I've moved into becoming more of a shop, I get that kind of feeling all the time now, because I've got so many colonies moving through the stages. It's really rewarding, actually, because I get that all the time. It's beautiful.
That's amazing.
That is brilliant. Yeah. Have you got so we're talking, so you've said the leaf cutters are your sort of expert level. Yeah. Would you say that so we've talked about the easiest to care for. I mean, you've already spoke about the leaf cutters, but have you noticed that there's a trend in people buying a certain species of ant at the moment? I think I know what the answer is going to be of what ant it is, but maybe some people they're going and getting them, and then maybe they're a bit too experience level's a bit too high. So you look like you're agreeing.
Yeah. So Solenopsis in general can be quite difficult. The American fire ant, Solenopsis geminata and Solenopsis invicta, they are nightmares in my opinion. Like, not everyone shares that opinion. Lots of people love those ants, and they are a great species of ant, but I would prefer to keep them in the wild. They're just they grow really, really fast, like phenomenally fast, and they're very hard to keep in the enclosures. So in the ant keeping world, we have several different types of barrier we use. We use talcum powder with alcohol, which kind of leaves the white barrier you can see on the tank. We use PTFE, oil-based stuff. Fire ants have been known to get past all of it, and they've also been known to get past water basins, which is another technique we use to keep ants in. So they're yeah, they're just difficult to keep, and they're always hungry, which means they're always looking for more food. Um, but because of YouTubers like Ants Canada, there
Yeah.
is a massive popularity in keeping fire ants. So
Mhm.
last year we had quite an influx of new keepers wanting to go get fire ants, which they did. And within a few months, we found a lot of them were getting overwhelmed. They were asking for help because they're just breeding out of control, coming
Mhm.
all over the sides of the enclosures, and it does get a bit of a handful. So it's not one that I don't agree with keeping. But I
Mm.
think if you are going to keep, you definitely need to do your research and be fully prepared for what you're about to take on. Even keepers of my experience level do struggle with them.
Yeah.
Wow.
So with that in mind about doing your research, we were talking beforehand in the let's call it the green room, and you were saying about you're doing like a teaching subscription thing. Is that correct? Would people be
Yeah.
able to find out things through that, or?
Yeah, so on the website we have 3 different learning courses at the moment. We're working on the 4th. You get the beginner one, a intermediate one, and the Mesobarbarus one. The Mesobarbarus one is only 4 months. It's just a quick course into the whole harvester ant genus sort of thing, like because they're so different to normal ants. I just wanted to give them their own sort of spotlight.
Yeah.
And then the beginner one, like I said, we send you 3 ant colonies over the course of the year, all the food, all the formicarium, everything you need to know, but we send it in the right order and timing. So we
Right.
send you your first ants on the first month, but you won't get your housing for them until month 4. And that is literally to teach you to keep them in the test tube, which is an essential part of ant keeping, but it's something we all miss, especially when we're just starting. It's first thing you want to do is put them in a nest, and that is literally one of the first things you shouldn't do. So it's
Hmm.
like it teaches you in that way. So you also get like a whole month's worth of learning kind of materials to go with it with every month. It's really hard to explain,
So
but
so it's actually more of a subscription that you're signing up
yes,
for,
yeah, yeah,
where you're getting all of the
everything.
materials, the learning information, the outworlds, the nests, the food, everything like that.
Yeah.
And that sounds actually quite unique. I haven't come
Yeah.
across that from
It,
anyone
it
else.
it was my sort of baby project. It was the whole reason we started a website was to do this, and
Oh,
everything else followed behind. Uh, we wanted to make it more accessible for just generally everyone. If you don't know where to start, you don't know what to do,
yeah,
just I can literally send you everything. You don't need to buy anything for the rest of the year. You
that's
can't like,
amazing.
and yeah, we try and keep it as cheap as we can as well. So it's like I say, just accessible for everyone. I'm fed up with things being so hard to reach.
Yeah, hard to achieve,
Yeah, yeah,
especially in this climate as well, because it's these little things with the inverts, with the ants, with the things that actually make us feel quite good. But if they're out of everyone's price range,
yeah.
because
There is.
I did a bit of research beforehand, and like the dreaded Amazon, so I went on there and had a look, and like you're talking big bucks for something that from your website is actually really affordable.
Yeah,
So I find it quite interesting with
yeah,
that.
I
yeah.
honestly feel like that is really, really great for someone like me because I honestly don't really know a whole lot about ants, and I wouldn't know how to take care of them either. So, your subscription sounds like something that would be really, really cool because it's very hands-on. And then so you're teaching while it's if you will, gestating. And I think that's huge, especially for someone like me. I can see it and I can hear it be told to me, but unless I do it, I'm not going to learn it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm very much like that. I mean, I'm autistic myself, so having these sorts of it's exactly what I would have wanted, if you know what I mean, when I first
yeah.
started. Like, that's pretty much what I've gone off. If it would have helped me, I want to put it out there because it might be useful to someone else.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely.
And it just makes it accessible, doesn't it? Like
that's it.
Like we're all everyone in this hobby has their own different learning techniques and different abilities and different ways. And to have accessibility is really important, because it just means more people can enjoy the fascinating world of what we do, really.
Yeah.
That's
Leah.
what I'm all about. Yeah.
Leah, did you have a question? Sorry.
Oh yeah, I did actually, and it was kind of a perfect little segue into it.
Let's segue to you then, Leah.
Yeah, I actually was curious how do you keep an ant colony from overgrowing? Yeah.
You just have to be prepared for it, really. You can manage it with protein intake. Obviously, the more you feed them, the faster they'll grow. The less you feed them, the slower they'll grow. But it's not always like that. I think I've got a fly flying in front of the screen. Sorry. It's not always like that. So you just have to be aware of what you're buying. Like most ants, we know they're going to grow to a certain size. So my Diacama reductum, my Asian bullet ants, they only grow to about 200 workers. So I knew that I can put them into a formicarium that size, and they're never going to need to expand. Whereas my Polyrhacus dives right behind me, they could probably grow forever. And the way we're sort of dealing with that is we've attached a second and a third tank via the bridge that's behind my head.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they're in all three of those tanks at the minute, and there's thousands of them. We can put a pork chop in, and it will disappear overnight.
Really?
That's incredible.
Yeah, a whole pork chop. We're gonna test to see how far we can go with it, because pretty much anything we put in at the minute just disappears, bones and everything.
Oh, the bones as well.
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot of other things, like the isopods live in there. We've got beetles, millipedes, vampire crabs. I think there's sticking spiders. Everything you can think of lives in those tanks, but it is predominantly the weaver ants now. I say weaver ants, it's Polyrhacus dives to lesser weaver ants. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble with the ant keeping community.
Oh yeah, the tarantula community can be very sticklers about the scientific names and trying not to use the common the common names. So I understand.
Yeah, I was actually listening to, I'm going to fanboy a little bit, but listening to Tom Moran, and he said something that I really agree with, that scientific names aren't meant to be said. They're meant to be written down and read. And I'm like, actually, yeah, I think that is actually a big part of it, but also being able to tell the difference, because like you said, if you went weaver ants, well, which kind?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So with weaver ants, when you say weaver ants, people instantly think the big green ones. And in the ant keeping community, again, they're quite a hard ant to keep. I wouldn't want to give off the misconception that I've achieved that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. So there are hundreds of thousands of species of ants?
Not hundreds of thousands. There's about 18,000 different species currently known at the moment, but we think there could be that again that's unknown or close to it.
That's incredible. I didn't know that, because I know that for tarantulas, I believe there are 3,800 species of tarantulas.
They're thereabouts, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But ants, I mean, that's incredible. That's a lot.
I actually watched a fascinating video. I don't know if you're both familiar with the Corridor Crew on YouTube. Oh. There's a really good. They do CGI stuff, so like it feeds my inner geek. But there is actually one where one of the CGI artists met with some ant researchers, and he did a CGI representation of all the ants in the world, and it's actually a really interesting thing to be able to visually see on a screen. So if you get a chance, I'll share the link. I'll share the link.
Yeah, please do.
It's actually a really, you sort of go, wow, that many ants, and the size of it, and compared to the size of the world and all that kind of stuff. Sorry.
There's a really cool, like, larger ant species here in the States. I don't know if, because it seems that they are kind of international. They're everywhere. But they're called carpenter ants, and I don't know the scientific term for them, but they're fascinating to me. I see them around my house occasionally, and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna pick you up and take you outside, but that probably isn't the best.
Yeah, so carpenter ants is literally the common name for anything in the Camponotus genus that I mentioned earlier, which
okay, cool.
There's around 3,000 to 5,000 species in just that genus.
Wow.
There's a lot. I can't remember exactly how many, but it's one of the largest genuses of ants is Camponotus.
Wow. That's incredible. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah. You get so many different variations as well. Everything from, I've got some here, Camponotus nicobarensis. They're from America, and they've got lots of like browns and reds as well as the standard black, and just beautiful colors you get in Camponotus. Fedoskis as well. They're yellow. They're from America, but again, they're just absolutely stunning.
How amazing! It's so fascinating to me. I did a bit of research about ants and kind of the research that's, you know me. And so there's actually a lot of research going on right now into the synapses of ants and their brains, and actually what allows them to be able to work so well as a team, and to build these colonies and everything. Do you feel like you would have anything to add to that kind of research, or do you feel like it's something worth looking at?
As Ants on a Rock, we are actually already involved in quite a few different research projects going on all around the world.
Wonderful.
I won't go into which ones we're involved in, but there's quite a few in the States that we're involved in. Things like that. There's been quite a few things going on, yeah. But I'm not allowed to mention too much of what I'm doing. But yeah, obviously, I really find things like that really interesting. I try and keep my fingers in all the different works of what's going on in the ant world. The ant research at the minute, especially in the States, is like just exploded. In the last probably 5 to 10 years, they've found out so many new things, like super colonies being formed and things like that. So yeah, we are looking into the new traits, and it's sort of the next stage in evolution. And evolution is how they're going to form into bigger colonies and work together to basically outcompete us for resources.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a horror film waiting to be made.
Not quite, but
yeah,
they are definitely a force to be reckoned with. And in some places now, they are starting to work together in much larger teams where colonies work between themselves. There's been certain instances where queens won't like to meet, but the workers don't mind working together, and they're sharing resources between colonies, and it turns their colony from one colony into a super colony, which obviously has a much greater impact on the environment around them. So there's a lot of research being done into things like that at the moment.
Can I
That's incredible.
ask a follow-up question to that? So when keeping ants, so I'm only asking because I was flicking through YouTube the other day, and I can't remember what channel it was, but they were talking about keeping 2 ant colonies together in the same. Is that a possibility, or are you just asking for trouble?
You're asking for trouble, basically. It can be done. It can be done. I myself have 3 ant colonies in that one behind me, but it is very, very well researched. Now, it's sort of a size thing. If you have a really large species like Camponotus, and then you have a really small species like the acorn ant, you can sometimes put them together and they completely ignore each other because of the size difference.
Yeah.
In the one behind me, I have my Polyrhacus dives, I have acorn ants, and I have something known as the thief ant, which tends to be quite, given its name, inconspicuous. So they tend to get away with it as well. But I wouldn't generally recommend to anyone to put more than 1 ant colony in a form of care because it's just asking for trouble. Every ant colony, even ants of the same species, have a different pheromone for their own personal colony. And the minute they find something that's not, they will tend to fight. Not always.
Yeah.
It's again, this is something else that's under a lot of research at the minute because it is. We've always thought they will just fight if they meet, if their pheromones aren't the same. But it has now been noted that more workers are reluctant to fight if there's an abundance of resources and things like that. If there's no need to fight, they won't. They will just tend to meet and then walk the other way. But then a lot of scientists are disputing this, and it could come down to different species. So lots of research being done into that as well.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
There's a lot to be said about their intelligence. I mean, as far as I'm aware, as far as like the research and the studies that have been going on, they have found that ants are very intelligent.
Yes.
And that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, collectively, when you get them together, they are very, very intelligent. I can't remember what they call it, but it's the collective mindset or something like that. And
hive mind, I believe. Hive mind.
That's it. And it's really impressive to watch. And you can totally see it. If you separate a couple of workers away from the colony, give them nothing, like just take them away, they won't do anything. They just stop because they've got kind of no signals from everything else as to what to do and what's needed to be done. So they just stop eventually. And it's really quite interesting. But you can't reintroduce them because their pheromones are always changing as well. So after, say, a worker gets lost for about 2 or 3 days, by the time they come back, they'll be killed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that we get that in the tarantula world as well with communals. So, say for instance, the M. balfours. So if you take them out for too long, I've been doing a little bit of research because I've got something arriving, which is quite exciting. Yeah. And also Shady, lovely Shady Things gave me some. But if you take them out for too long and go back, it's about that territory. It's about the and the difference in pheromones and different things like that. Sorry, Leah, did you have a...
It's fascinating because they also have found that there is, with the Monocentropas balfours, there is definitely like a social, what is the social structure?
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll flirt with each other. There'll be one big female that's kind of the boss, and it's pretty fascinating that how they behave together.
Yeah, they have like the different kinds of... Sorry, I had a fruit fly myself. They'll have certain spiders doing dominance. They'll share food. I fed mine yesterday. Put a dead dubia roach, a pre-killed dubia roach into it, and to see them all feeding on the same one was actually really interesting. And then like pulling it apart and then going off to themselves. I expect the ants do very similar, but from what I've seen. So Ants Canada is, I watch a lot of I've seen a lot of Ants Canada. It's good to have on in the background, and it just sort of visually it's good. And you'll see with the ants that they'll go and feed each other and do different things. And I think that's absolutely fascinating because they've got what's it called? Is it I want to say but they've got like a communal stomach, but it's called something.
Oh, what? Sorry.
So where they store the food to then regurgitate. So
when they regurgitate, it's called trophallaxis.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
And that's when they share the food between themselves. Yeah, it is really interesting. I was just listening to what you say about balfour. I've actually really wanted some balfour for a long time now, so it probably will happen soon.
They're an awesome species.
Just communal tarantulas sound really cool to me. Yeah.
I suppose it feeds that thing, doesn't it, for you, Tom? Because you've got lots of communal species in your room, which you're in at the moment, and to have things that are working together is.
I like that sort of the way they work together. Yeah, that's the best thing about my big tank behind me is watching just nature happen naturally.
So
That's wonderful.
when you say about the nature aspect of it, or watching it happen and unfold in front of you, I suppose we could talk obviously about ants, but the thing that lots of people actually struggle with is keeping plants alive in there. Is there any is there any that you recommend would be quite good, or anything that you think is quite handy to start off
I
with people wanting to
generally,
develop?
I generally stick to ferns and things that are like easy.
Yeah.
Ferns, I found they're really hardy. They spread really fast. So you start with one, and you've got like 100 a year later. I mean, again, my tanks are just filled with them because they're just easy. They deal with a lot of humidity, quite temperature resistant, etc., etc. I found the prettier the flower, the more sensitive it is, really.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know what I mean. So things like Phoetonias, I really struggled with Phoetonias. I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrong. Um, but yeah, I tend to stick with just the standard ferns, Chinese money plants if it's a wetter area, because again, they love their moisture. We started to look into more types of plants, but to be honest, I tend to stick with the same ones just because I know them.
Yeah, I'm a pothos lover, so I do like a
Okay,
good
yeah,
pothos going in there. Because I ask about plants as well, because you will see when you're doing a bit of research, maybe watching some videos of Ants Canada or any other keepers. They'll do ones where their outworld dies effectively, so the ants remodel
yeah.
and strip it out and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was just sort of thinking about
It
that.
does happen. That does happen, and
Yeah.
I admit some ants are absolute nightmares for it. Mesobarbarus in particular, they like to dig up everything and just cover it with dirt. But some ants that like my weaver ants, they use the plants as their nesting material, and it's really important to them to have that. But yeah, you do see some outworlds that do die. I don't want to say anything like that can be taken negatively, but I think quite often some of them are poorly built, if you know what I mean. If you like when we were planning this one behind me, we planned for the longevity, if you know what I mean. So we knew that certain plants were going to be torn to pieces. We knew that they would ignore other things. And we knew that, we just kind of took into consideration what we thought the ants were going to do before we even started building. I think a lot of that, people get so excited. They've got an ant colony, they're going to do the bioactive build, and they sort of rush into it a bit. I think that might be a lot of the problem sometimes. It's just, you just got to slow down and really do a bit more research as to what the effects of that ant colony might be. I mean, some ants, such as Formica, they spray formic acid almost constantly to the point where they produce gases and can kill themselves in an enclosed unit. So,
wow.
What effects that going to have on your plants?
Yeah.
So,
I think it also touches back on what you were saying a bit earlier when you were saying like people want to get the ants and they want to put it into a nest and it's too soon. What I've learned is about, so if you're going to set up an outworld or an enclosure for any invert, is if you can set it up maybe a month, 2 months before you're going to put anything in it, so it gives that opportunity for it to establish itself and sort of find its balance, because you are making a mini ecosystem, aren't you? Really?
Yeah, definitely.
And doing that. Whereas if you've got loose soil and fresh plants that are just starting to adjust, and then you get some ants come in or other creatures coming in and disturbing it, you're on a higher percentage of it dying, aren't you?
Yeah, very, very much.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the prettier the flower, the more attention it gets from the ants, and that actually
it's sort of the nectars they produce. Like, so the prettier, like, that's very generalization. Don't get me wrong, but producing like a nice sweet nectar, the ants will spend a lot more time there. They'll even move aphids. I don't know if you know about farming aphids, but ants will farm aphids, and they'll carry them from one plant to another, group them all around one set area. Eventually, it will kill the plant because of the damage the aphids do.
So they actually farm the aphids.
Yeah,
That's
they'll carry them about.
Fascinating. Wow.
Yeah. So the aphids, when I think they stroke their backs basically, and the aphids will produce like a sweet nectar that the ants really enjoy.
Oh, wow.
So, well, what I was getting at was, does that make them more similar to their cousins of bees and wasps and whatnot? Because I know the bees and wasps, their eyesight is attuned to be able to see those real pretty colors like the purples and the blues through like UV. I mean, they have a color spectrum that we don't even come close to fathoming. So are ants similar in that way?
They've sort of gone the opposite. So research shows that over time, ants have sort of developed to not use their eyes. They go more off chemical triggers and so on.
Okay.
If you look back into the more ancient species, like there is species that haven't changed in millions and millions of years, and off the top of my head, I can't think of a single one.
It'll come to you. It'll come to you at 4 o'clock in the morning. You'll be like, oh, there you go.
I expect so. But there's quite a few. That'll be my wife burning dinner. There's quite a few species of ants that haven't changed a lot since like dinosaur age. Even before that, 32 million years we've been able to trace ants back to roughly, and they haven't changed much. So, and you can really see that in the males. The male ants still look like pretty much like wasps and bees. They've still got the pointed gaster, and so they've maintained a lot of the traits of wasps, but the eyesight is one thing that has changed completely. Mainly due to them living underground. So they're going more of the chemical sense and things like that, vibrations, anything that can be sensed in darkness rather than using their eyes. Whereas you find, there we go, my diet camera, they're quite an ancient species of ant. And I say that they literally haven't changed, like evolved in millions of years. They're lone hunters rather than going out in trails. They use their eyes to spot the prey, and they will attack it on their own. They'll only call in for extra ant help if they really need it, or if other ants see it, which is really interesting. They think about 25 million years ago was when they really started taking to the chemicals being the main source of information.
Wow, that's really incredible.
Yeah.
So just so you know, Simon from the Mantis Guard, I had this all written down for the ants video he did. So I think he's a bit there, Tom.
Simon and me chat quite a lot, so he's got quite a few ant colonies himself. I expect he's been talking. Yeah, there you go. Made a lovely terrarium for his Metabarbarus, and in 2 days they had buried it. Yeah, sounds about right. Like they just love to dig stuff up and cover it in dirt. Metabarbarus are actually really smart because they're nightmares when it comes to dirt. If you've got a barrier, say oil barrier, they'll use the dirt to make a pile up past the barrier so that they can get out.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow, I bet.
And that does show the intelligence and like the collective mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
And that problem solving.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow, that's so cool. Have you found that outside of like natural enemies, do your ant colonies, do they have any kind of enemies that would or threats to them that could be a threat to the colony itself? Outside of like mold and
yeah. So I'm really sensitive about any kind of aerosols being used in my office or anywhere there's my insects, because I just don't think they've got I just don't know what it's going to do. Yeah, it can be good, but generally it is just kind of. I'm going to forget everything I just said. The main thing that will kill off any ant colony is doing too much with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot like tarantulas as well. Overwatering, overfeeding. These will definitely destroy a tarantula. So that makes sense.
That's it. And I mean, it's horrible to say because the first thing we want to do is watch our pets, but you just got to leave them to be natural. I find the more natural you can go, like if you can't go natural enclosure, even if you've just got a box and just let them forage themselves and just don't keep messing with them.
Right.
That because that's the biggest issue for ant keeping, is humans.
Yeah.
We
So
just can't leave it alone.
my understanding is the less you mess with them, the more you're going to see of them, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So the more you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean,
That's amazing.
it definitely takes a lot of time and a lot of patience, and it is really hard to do, especially if you've just bought one ant colony. Let's see, all you want to do is watch them. I actually normally advise you buy 2 or 3. Normally, one won't make it. We'll say that.
Yeah.
But it just means that you've got more things to kind of do, and you're less likely to just keep messing with that one. If you know what I mean?
Yeah. So Simon's asked us to ask you why his ants ate the aphids he put in. I don't know if that's a in joke or
If they ate the aphids, this isn't that surprising either. Ants are not picky when it comes to them being hungry. Sometimes they'll live next to the aphid. Sometimes they'll say it's protein time. Same with springtails and pretty much anything else. Like they will live in harmony with most things, but when they get hungry, anything's on the menu.
So it could be a fact that they, like you said, they are looking for that little bit of protein. So if you've gone a little bit of time without putting in like a pre-kill cricket or something along those lines, they're just getting the munchies effectively.
That's it. That is it. I mean, the thing about ants is it's not the workers getting hungry; it's the brood. So if you think you've got potentially 100, if you've got 100 eggs, you've got 100 screaming mouths because they're all making noises that the ants can hear, and that's what's triggering them to go and get the food. So, like, even if you feed all of them, like on a massive roach, you guarantee 1 or 2 of them gonna be hungry within a day. Same as my kid.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So that's essentially what it is. The colony will always, not always, but most of the time be looking for food because there'll always be 1 or 2 brood that are still screaming for it. There's always sort of issues going on.
So I had another shoot. I think it just left my brain, but oh, right. So Ants Canada. I did notice that there were a couple of videos where he essentially puts colonies against one another. Is that something that is like a normal practice, or is that just a way of like population control?
It's a way of getting views, to be honest. So
Yeah,
we love Ants Canada because he does amazing videos with some great information,
right.
and he brings a lot of people into the hobby. But when you start getting into the hobby, you do start to realize that his ethics aren't quite what we would do by my standards, we'll say.
I was very curious about that because it seemed very kind of unethical to me.
I mean, there was a video about 1.5 years ago where he put 8 ant colonies in one formicarium together. It did cause a massive upset in the ant keeping community, and I think a lot of people watching him because of it. It's one of those things we all know not to do it. It's about views.
It's difficult, isn't it? It is definitely a difficult sort of situation. I think if you were to be, let's say, for instance, it was in a different setting, so it was in a scientific lab, and they wanted to see the behaviors and doing that,
kind of study,
and also we didn't know how they would behave. Still not ethical, really, I suppose, but to actually gather that information for the knowledge to see would be good. But also, like you said, Tom, he has some brilliant information there as well. The same as your channel, you've got some brilliant information on there, and sometimes we have to not ignore. I think that would be wrong, but
You have to let it go.
we need to challenge, but not be in cahoots with it as well. So sort of like if you don't agree with something you see, the creators, they need to know.
Yeah,
but you don't have to say it in an abusive way.
Yeah.
But
Right.
they just need to know that actually that's not cool, and actually it doesn't fit within the moral compass of ant keeping or pet keeping.
I always make it clear to all of my viewers and anyone that supports me that no matter where you go in the world, everyone's got a different way of doing things. You know, what's right for them might not be right for us. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just our own personal views, the way we do things. You know, there's no point in having a go at someone about something, but we can always talk about things and talk about how we do things differently, and maybe they might decide to change their practice.
Definitely, and it's about that education, isn't it? If content creators or have their audience voicing, actually, we don't like this, you know, and because as a content creator, you want to be making stuff your audience wants to watch. But then you do also find yourself in a bit of a sticky situation where I've seen it with some other creators where they've made something and someone will put a comment on, and then their following will defend the creator, even though you know that they've kind of done it wrong. Bear from Eight-Legged Freaks. Do you know Bear Phoenix, Tom? Have you met Bear?
I do know, I do know.
So he actually put a really interesting video up on TikTok the other day, and it was talking about dog fighting or pet fighting, and I was sort of like, oh, well, where's this going? And then he refers to the videos that we do see on YouTube, and they get recommended of a scorpion versus a tarantula, or and all of this sort of thing, and it is animal abuse.
It is.
Doing those things, like they're inverts, they are sentient beings. They're not just a robot doing something, and to put them into that situation just isn't.
Everything I do, and a lot of the ant keepers that I work with and other YouTubers that I work with, we all kind of don't support live feeding of the ants. There's just no real reason for ants. Some creatures, yes, you need that kind of live activity to get the feeding response, but with ants, they're more than happy to scavenge 99%.
Because they are scavengers, aren't they?
And just like I say, watching them kind of trying to take out a animal or whatever, and it's just not right. Like I can't do it myself, you know what I mean? I've always sort of got that idea that I don't even want to think about the feeders that I'm killing, because they have to remain just feeders to me, not named pets, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if I started getting attached to them, I'd find it really hard to kill them as well. But so it's got to be done. I always say there's no benefit for the ants to do a live feeding, really. You know, it's just it's safer to do pre-killed feeding, and that way you get rid of the mites and things as well. Because what we do is dip it in hot water for 3 seconds just to kill it, and then it's safe to give to the ants. And that's sort of what we condone on my channel. Like, we never have a go at anyone who wants to do live feedings. That's their choice, but it's not something that I recommend doing. You know, I mean, I have had a cricket come back to life in a tank once and just start eating my ants. So it's they'll cause damage to each other.
Because crickets will cannibalize, and also they are after protein themselves. There's there's like a shift over to locusts for tarantulas because they don't tend to bite as much.
Okay.
So whereas crickets, they'll gnaw on your tarantula's leg whilst the tarantula's eating it. So doing that.
Yeah.
So we're getting to that bit of the podcast, which is the end, guys. So I'm just wondering, Thomas, we call this section the shamelessly plugged section, and I don't know if you have anything coming up in the future or anything you would like to plug or where you want some of the viewers to go to check you out.
Well, I'm actually really awful at this, but everyone, and especially Simon, tells me I'm really bad at advertising myself. But, obviously, check me out on YouTube and the website. If you're interested in ants, just send me a message literally anywhere, anytime. I'm pretty much always behind the computer. If I'm not, I'm asleep behind the computer.
Yeah.
We're literally on like almost every channel. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Twitch,
and is it all ants,
Patreon, TikTok, everything?
Is it all just search for ants?
We do, ants on the rock on literally anything, and we're there. Obviously, we do ants. We have lots of other interesting stuff. I started venturing into other inverts as well, and some other non-invert stuff, just because why not? If I find it interesting, I just want to show everyone else, basically. But the main thing that I am going to tell you about, and I know you already know, but the main thing I'm going to tell the viewers about is the big Bristol show that we're holding this year. So we, as well as Ants on the Rock, I also own something called Ant Exhibition UK, which is part of the Ants on the Rock, and we host shows, big ant and invert shows. This is going to be the very start of our second year will be the Bristol show, and it's growing, it's a really good event. We've got some really great traders coming and stuff.
So just to ask, is that's just for people that are listening, that's different from the Invert show, isn't it? So we've got the Invert show on the 30th of July. And when's yours, Thomas?
On the 5th of August, literally
on the 5th of August.
Yeah. So it was we didn't realize it was so close when we booked it like years back. It's one of those things you book so far ahead that things are just going to crash. But yeah, so it's different one from the Invert show. This is the Great Ant Exhibition, and so there's ants, but there is other inverts as well. There's tarantulas. We've got spar spiders coming along to it, so that's really good. I always like popping over the spar spiders because they've got some great stuff.
Awesome.
But we've got some really great traders, but to be honest, I'm less about the trader side of it. I'm more about the rest of what's going on. So when I used to go to like drummer festivals and stuff, I admit I never had much money. So by the time I got there, I had paid for the travel and I had paid to get in. I'd generally get a pair of drumsticks and be completely skinned. And I'd have a look round and that'd be my day done, time to go home. And I always kind of think, what else can we do that's not going to cost anyone money, that they're just going to enjoy what we enjoy? So we've got the stage is going to be packed all day with different experiences, different talks, and lots of cool stuff on stage. We've got professors coming from the Cardiff University to talk about research they're doing into ants, things
Wonderful.
like that. We've got different demonstrations going on around the room, a whole exhibit area where you can see my leaf cutters and some of my tanks that I'll be taking with me. Children's entertainers. So we're just kind of gone you know what I mean? You can come meet Batman. There should be Batman and Ant-Man walking around all day. So
brilliant.
Absolutely.
So Simon says, don't forget the flyers for him to put with his orders.
Will do.
I'm not gonna. He said he'll come and work for you.
That's great.
Adult entertainment. And also, I believe for our NHS colleagues, there's an NHS discount for the show.
Yes, there is 50% off. It's only £5 a ticket, anyways. 50% off if you're in an NHS, and it is free for under 13s, I think it is.
Okay, brilliant.
That's a good discount.
It's my own show. Free for under 13s.
Yeah, brilliant. Leah, have you got
Yeah.
anything? Do you want to shamelessly plug your personal social media stuff?
No, just kind of the usual, YouTube and TikTok and my cat Twinkles.
Yeah.
And then I was actually curious how your Uthaka is doing.
Who's Simons?
Oh, West. No, West
that's
Spot. West Spot and Uthaka. My bad.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I will shamelessly plug me. So I'm Nat from Somerset Spiders. You can check me out on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I think I'm going to get Twitter because YouTube keeps telling me to post to Twitter. I don't understand it, but anyway. But yeah, I've got a new video coming out next Friday at 5:30. So it'd be cool to see some of you guys there. So Tom,
Awesome.
I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I've learned so much.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to sign up for one of your subscriptions because I think that is actually a really good way to do it properly without running in at 100 miles an hour and being disappointed. So I'll message you later on. So thanks for everyone that's watching. It's a goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from Leah, and a goodbye from Tom. All right.